Hi everyone. So what I decided to do is to start from the very beginning. I want to make available to you guys these videos that have the information, all the information that is covered under the Gilded Age. And this will be good for two reasons. Number one, it'll be good for those of you that have been absent for whatever reason, including school functions, activities, or whatever, to kind of catch up on the things that you missed and my lecture. And it's also good for those of you that were present, but now you have an additional resource to go to besides your notes that you can listen to and see before examinations. Okay, so before we get started into the other slides, take a look at the picture that's here as the title cover for the Gilded Age. Now, we have covered this man. If you notice here on his collar, it says Rockefeller. Now, Rockefeller was one of the robber barons that we discussed. Remember, he was in control of the oil industry. And so what you have here is one of your classic robber barons holding in the palm of his hand what looks to be the White House. And if you look down here, it almost looks like he's twisting a knob, kind of like one of those music boxes that you twist at the bottom and get to play. And so what this would insinuate is that Rockefeller, who, if you look back here, it's all black. This is all oil that's drowning the city. This oil and Rockefeller are manipulating our government. And that is what this picture is trying to insinuate. So let's move on to an overview of what the Gilded Age was. During the Gilded Age, the United States grew to become one of the world's strongest industrial powers. Now remember, industry. When you think of industrial, I want you to think industry. American innovation, which means new inventions, ideas, concepts that were now becoming better for society. New technology. Entrepreneurship, we discussed this. What is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is somebody who takes a risk, somebody who's trying to start a new business or invest in a new business. So you see a lot of inventions, technology, people making things better, people investing their money, starting up new businesses. And of course, with all of this comes with the need for labor. Now, we said that a good synonym for the word labor is worker or work. And so we see the growth of the labor force due to the growth of this new industrial power. And the work conditions for these laborers, like we've discussed, were poor. We had very poor working conditions, and of course this leads into a need for people to get together and unionize or unite against the business owners and management. So during this time, the poor are getting poorer, unfortunately, the rich are getting richer. Now, on the previous page, you saw one of the robber barons, but there were several. These guys were called captains of industry. And the reason that they were able to become so rich, like it says here, first millionaires, the reason that they were so powerful was because of the United States policy of laissez-faire. Now remember, laissez-faire, that's when we put our hands up in the air and shook them around. Laissez-faire means hands off. So they had a hands-off approach to business, and because of that, the robber barons were able to become really, really rich. So back to the actual meaning of the phrase Gilded Age, or why it was called the Gilded Age. This is a term that was given by Mark Twain. And if you remember what we discussed, the word gilded, what it means is something that gives the appearance of being extremely valuable, okay? Something that maybe is covered in gold, but on the inside, it is not as valuable as it would look on the outside. So basically, if you translate this to what was happening in the United States, yes, everything looked golden. I mean, our cities were growing, businesses were booming, money was being made. However, this was all filled with corruption, corruption by robber barons, corruption by government, and abuse of people. Okay, so some of the new technologies that we already did in an assignment were the following. You had the Bessemer process that was created by Henry Bessemer, and this was important because steel now became more economical to produce. You also have Elias Howe with the sewing machine, Alicia Otis, the passenger elevator, Christopher Scholl's typewriter, Alexander Jubel, the phone, Thomas Edison with the electric light bulb, and Orville and Wilbur Wright, which is the airplane. Okay, during the Gilded Age, you also have something known as industrialization. Okay, now remember, when you see the word industrialization, I want for you to think industry. And when you think industry, I want for you to think of factories. Okay, so industrialization in essence means the growth of factories. Okay, and factors promoting industrialization, in other words, these are the reasons why factories are growing. This is the reason why businesses are growing. Partly because of the free enterprise system. People were there to make money. They were there to start businesses, and they could pretty much produce whatever they wanted because we had a laissez-faire policy through the U.S. government. Also, because of these new technologies, the supply was going up. People wanted these things, and with increase of supply, the increase in demand requires that you increase supply. And so people wanted the stuff, and so the businesses had to supply it. Now in class we also discussed the difference between a business versus a corporation. Now a business is going to be your small mom and dad pop shop that you're going to find on your street corner. Okay, a business can be anything. You can start a business, I can start a business. Now a corporation is huge. Okay, a corporation is going to be something like Walmart. A business would be like Super S. Walmart is a corporation, something that can be found nationwide. You have an increase in shareholders, people who are investing money into these corporations, into these businesses, looking to increase their investment through profit. Free enterprise system, like we discussed up here, the creation of a national market. You see this together with the rise of corporations as businesses get bigger due to shareholders and also due to the building of the railroads. Now the railroads were really, really important because now businesses can not only sell to people that are around them, but they can be a national market by reaching people who are out west. So the building of railroads connects the eastern U.S. to the western U.S., and this is good not only for business, but for the growth of population. Now, robber barons, like we saw in the first picture, robber barons, remember when you think of robber, I want you to think of someone who's after money or after things of value. These were businessmen who sometimes used ruthless tactics, which we gave some examples of ruthless tactics, things that are not necessarily ethical, kind of sneaky, and they do these things in order to destroy their competition. Remember we talked about the example with grapes. If there was no competition in Laredo for the sale of grapes, then I could sell them for any price that I wanted, because when you don't have competition, you know that you're the only game in town and people are going to have to pay what you're asking for the product if they indeed want the product. And at the same time, not only did they destroy competition and their competitors, but they also kept their workers' wages low. Remember, during this time, there's no such thing as minimum wage. They could pretty much pay people whatever it is that they wanted, and if the people didn't like it, well, then they could go. A lot of these robber barons based their tactics on the notion of social Darwinism. Now, we said social has to do with people, and Darwinism is based on Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Now, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is that only the strong of the species have survived up to this point. The strongest characteristics in people have survived and evolved over time, and if you apply that to a social aspect, then what these guys are saying is that if you are strong and if you are intelligent, if you are cunning, then you will survive and you will flourish. And if you are not, if you are weak and you are not smart, then you will die. And people who believe in the idea of social Darwinism would say, you know, only the strong survive. Two of the famous robber barons that we covered were Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. Now, Andrew Carnegie was in control of the steel industry, and John D. Rockefeller was in control of the oil refineries, or oil refining industry, excuse me. Now, remember, we also talked about Andrew Carnegie being a philanthropist. Later on in life, he did become a philanthropist, establishing universities and libraries. And now people might ask, well, how does that fall in line with the idea of social Darwinism? So Andrew Carnegie didn't just donate money to, you know, to just anybody and say, oh, here's $20, go feed your family. What he did was create avenues for people to help themselves. So if they wanted to work hard and make themselves strong, they would have the opportunity to do so. So let's look at some of the conditions of labor. Labor, remember, labor means work. Low wages, long hours, no job security. There was no FMLA back then. If you broke your hand and your job was to unload boxes, well, guess what? Now you can't do your job, and now you don't have a job, and now you can't feed your family. There was nobody looking out for people who face these kinds of tragedies. You also had child labor, small children doing the jobs of adults, also for long hours and low wages. You also had these jobs being boring, repetitive tasks. So as a result of all of these work conditions, you get a couple of things coming out, one being the Knights of Labor. Now, the Knights of Labor were a labor union, and if you look at the term labor union, remember, labor means work, union would mean coming together or uniting. So workers eventually got together and created organizations such as the Knights of Labor. And what they were aiming to achieve was an 8-hour workday. Remember, I don't want to work at night anymore. I only want an 8-hour day. And also equal pay. We talked about the notion of women nowadays wanting equal pay. Knight in shining armor is going to make that happen. Another labor union was the American Federation of Labor, or AFL, and they wanted to focus on collective bargaining. Collective meaning all together, all of us, meaning worker and management coming together and negotiating, coming to some kind of agreement to the workers' grievances or their problems, their issues, etc. We also talked about Samuel Gompers. Now, Samuel Gompers led some of the craft unions, meaning skilled labor. Remember, we talked about the difference between skilled and unskilled labor. An example of skilled labor would be like an architect, a welder, an electrician, somebody who needs a specific type of knowledge to do a job. Now, the Haymarket Affair of 1886, this was a fatal Chicago protest where the people were protesting the death of a protester that had died the day before, and unfortunately, it got really ugly, and people died. It was a fatal protest. So I'm going to post this up on Edmodo. It's here for you to review. You should have notes on it. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, and I will post more videos later. Thanks.